Ladies, let's talk about a question that echoes in the hearts of countless women, whispered in silence and screamed in pain. Why do 99% of husbands get bored of their wives? It's not just a statistic. It's a heartbreak repeated across kitchens, bedrooms, WhatsApp messages left on read, and glances that no longer hold fire. It's a loneliness that crawls in even when you're sitting next to the one you married. But let's stop pointing fingers for a moment. Let's pause and peel back the layers. When a man falls in love, he often falls for the mystery, the chase, the sparkle, that moment when everything is new, uncertain, exciting. And women, we give it our all. We transform ourselves to fit into that perfect image, the supportive wife, the caring daughter, in-law, the selfless mother. But in doing so, we often abandon the very woman he fell in love with ourselves. We stop dressing up for ourselves, we stop dreaming for ourselves, we stop living for ourselves, and then one day that man looks at us and doesn't recognize the woman he married, but neither do we. Ladies, boredom doesn't grow in chaos. It grows in routine, in expectation, in silence, in taken for granted love. A man doesn't get bored because his wife aged or put on weight or has stretch marks from giving birth to his child. No, he gets bored when she stops being her, when she stops evolving, when she starts orbiting around him instead of glowing in her own light. But let's also be honest, some men don't want a woman who shines too brightly. Some want comfort, not challenge, a warm meal, not a deep conversation, a nurse, not a queen. And when a woman starts asking for emotional intimacy, intellectual equality, shared dreams suddenly, she's too much. Here's the hard truth: you can't force someone to stay excited about you. What you can do is stay excited about yourself. The woman who keeps growing not for him, but for herself is the woman who remains unforgettable. So no, wives are not boring. They are overworked, underappreciated, emotionally neglected, and still showing up every day. They are the backbone, the silent warriors, the women who gave up pieces of themselves just to hold the house together. But the time has come to reclaim your power. Be interesting not for his attention, but for your own reflection. Laugh loudly, love wildly, learn constantly. Be the woman you were before the world told you to shrink yourself to fit into a marriage. And to the husbands, if your listening boredom is not your wife's failure. It is your blindness. Open your eyes, see her, not just her chores, not just her sacrifices, her. Because if 99% of husbands are bored, maybe it's not about the wives. Maybe it's about the lens through which they stopped seeing them. And to the women, stop waiting to be seen. Stand up, speak, sparkle, shine, because boredom is not your burden to carry. You were never meant to be ordinary. When a woman gets married, she often brings her dreams, her spark, her laughter, and her individuality with her. She enters the marriage as a full, complex person with her own identity. But slowly, and often silently, she begins to trade those parts of herself for roles she feels obligated to fill. The role of the perfect wife, the understanding daughter-in-law, the ever-available mother, and in the process, she starts fading away from herself. Her favorite books gather dust. Her hobbies become a distant memory. Her laughter dims. Her dreams take a back seat. Her desires become second to everyone else's. And then one day, she looks into the mirror and doesn't recognize the woman staring back, and neither does her husband. This is not a blame game. It's a reflection of what society expects from a married woman. She is taught that her success lies in how well she can maintain the peace, how seamlessly she can fit into her husband's life, how she must give without asking and compromise without hesitation. She is expected to be the glue that holds the family together, but no one teaches her how to hold herself together in the process. Her life becomes a cycle of care for her children, her partner, her in-laws, her home, and in that cycle, she forgets to care for her own heart. This sacrifice, while noble, is often misunderstood. Her husband may not realize the cost she's paying. He sees her present physically but absent emotionally. He notices the routine, the predictability, the silence. And he calls it boredom, but what he's really witnessing is the erosion of the very woman he once pursued. She didn't stop being interesting. She just stopped having the time, space, or support to express who she really is. She didn't stop being beautiful. She stopped being seen. She didn't stop loving. She just stopped being loved in return, the way she needed to be. The tragedy lies in how invisibly this transformation happens. It's not a switch that flips one day. It's gradual, it's subtle. It begins when she puts someone else's dreams before her own, when she apologizes for asking for help, when she laughs less because no one really listens, when she keeps quiet in arguments just to keep the peace. And slowly, the girl who once danced to her own rhythm starts walking on eggshells in her own home. The irony is painful. She gives everything, her energy, her youth, her love, in the hope of creating a happy home, only to be labeled as boring or changed. But the truth is, she didn't change for herself, she changed for them. And that's the problem, because in losing herself to fulfill the role of a wife, she unknowingly created a gap not just between her and her husband, but between who she was and who she's become. What needs to be remembered not just by men, but by society, is that a woman's spirit is not a switch you can turn off and on. When she's supported, encouraged, and seen as a whole person, she blooms. When her individuality is nourished, her beauty deepens, her mind sharpens, and her love becomes limitless. But when she is only valued for how well she serves others, her soul begins to dim. So when a husband says he's bored, maybe he needs to ask himself, what did I do to keep her spirit alive? Because most wives don't get boring, they just get buried, and even the most extraordinary women can lose their light in a world that never pauses to ask them what they need. A lot of people assume that men get bored in marriages because their wives no longer look the same, dress the same, or behave the same way they did before. But that's surface-level thinking. The truth goes far deeper, and it's not about wrinkles or weight or fashion. It's about something that lives much deeper than appearances. It's about emotional starvation. It's about a relationship that's no longer being fed with curiosity, connection, or care. Boredom in marriage is rarely physical. It is almost always emotional. When two people come together, they are excited by each other's minds, stories, and dreams. They talk late into the night, not because they have to, but because they want to. They share secrets, they explore each other's worldviews, and they build a foundation of curiosity and emotional intimacy. But over time, that hunger for emotional closeness is replaced by logistics bills, groceries, school runs, career plans, in-laws, social obligations. Conversations shrink to what's for dinner, or did you pay the electricity bill? There's no more magic. No more emotional vulnerability, no more effort to know each other deeply and freshly. And what happens next? One person starts to feel invisible. Most often it's the wife. She's speaking but not heard. She's doing but not appreciated. She's existing but not really seen. Her emotional world becomes a locked room with no one even trying to knock. And in return, she starts pulling back, protecting herself from the hurt of being ignored. And when she stops trying, he interprets it as coldness, detachment, or disinterest. But what he doesn't see is how long she stayed emotionally available, silently waiting to be met halfway. On the other side, the husband feels the distance too. But instead of asking why, instead of leaning in, he assumes something is wrong with her or with the marriage. He blames the silence on routine, the lack of excitement on her mood, the growing gap on time. But boredom in a relationship doesn't come from years passing, it comes from love no longer evolving. A marriage, like any living thing, needs nourishment. You don't plant a seed and walk away expecting it to bloom. You water it, you tend to it, you give it sunlight, but many men forget that a relationship needs the same care, emotional care, to ask, how are you really? To listen without trying to fix, to sit in silence and still feel close. To know her fears, her current dreams, her shifting thoughts, not just her daily schedule. When that emotional bridge is broken, everything else starts to crumble. Physical intimacy loses meaning. Conversations feel transactional. And slowly, boredom creeps in, not because the wife has changed, but because the connection between hearts has died. But here's the powerful truth: boredom can be reversed. It doesn't take grand gestures. It takes presence, honesty, a simple hand reached out at the right moment, a look that says, I see you, a sentence that asks, what do you need from me today? Because the moment emotional intimacy returns, boredom disappears. It's not magic, it's just awareness, it's just effort, and it's just love, real, alive, and awake. Routine, it's the silent killer of romance. It sneaks in without warning, wrapping itself around the day-to-day until everything feels predictable, mechanical, and hollow. Most marriages don't break from big fights or betrayals. They wither under the weight of repetition, the same conversations, the same problems, the same expectations day after day, and that's where boredom finds its home. Not in the people themselves, but in a relationship that's no longer being refreshed, a connection that's been left untouched for too long. In the beginning, love is alive, it's raw, it's unpredictable. There's excitement in the unknown, but over time that spontaneity gets replaced by structure. Structure isn't bad, it brings stability, but without effort, stability becomes monotony and people start drifting. A husband might look at his wife and think she's become distant, dull, unresponsive, but the truth is they've just stopped growing together. They've stopped surprising each other, laughing with each other, learning each other's changing selves. Growth was replaced by assumption, discovery replaced by routine. Think about it. When was the last time you sat down with your partner and asked, what are you dreaming about lately? Or what's been on your heart these days? We assume we know everything about the person we married. But people evolve. We are not who we were 5 years ago. And if we stop exploring each other, we lose the chance to meet the new version of the one we love. When curiosity dies, connection dies. This is where many husbands get it wrong. They mistake routine for safety. They think the fact that everything is functioning means everything is fine, but women often crave more than functioning. They crave feeling, and when they're met only with the same questions, same tone, same gestures, their hearts begin to shrink. They start to feel invisible, unimportant, emotionally starved, and slowly, without even realizing it, they stop sharing, they stop opening up, not because they don't want to, but because they no longer expect to be heard. And on the other side, the husband starts feeling disconnected too, but instead of asking why, he pulls away even further. He blames the marriage, he blames her, he blames time, but the real issue is that their bond hasn't been fed in a long time. They haven't created moments of renewal, and when love isn't renewed, it rusts. Boredom isn't the presence of silence, it's the absence of meaningful interaction. You can sit in silence with someone and feel deeply connected. But when you stop feeding the emotional, mental, and even spiritual parts of your relationship, it becomes dry, heavy, routine. But here's the beauty: this isn't the end. Routine doesn't have to be the enemy. In fact, when paired with conscious renewal, routine becomes a rhythm you can dance to, but it requires effort, a date night, a random compliment, a deep conversation, a shared goal, a playful fight, a kiss that means something, a touch that says, I still want you. Because when love is refreshed, even a familiar face becomes new again. Even an old story feels like the first time. Even a long marriage can feel like young love. Routine will always be there, but boredom doesn't have to be. Some men don't get bored because their wives have changed. They get bored because their wives have started asking for more emotional presence, more maturity, more partnership, and that's when the shift begins. Because let's be honest, some men are comfortable only as long as they are not being challenged. As long as the woman stays quiet, agreeable, emotionally available, and endlessly giving. But the moment she starts speaking up, expressing her boundaries, or demanding emotional connection, suddenly she becomes too much, too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding. What's actually happening is not boredom, it's resistance. Resistance to being accountable, resistance to looking inward, resistance to evolving alongside the woman they once claimed to love. Many men want the version of their wives that smiled through exhaustion, forgave without apology, adjusted without questioning, and prioritized their needs over her own. But when that same woman starts reclaiming her identity, when she begins setting emotional standards, when she expects partnership instead of servitude, the man doesn't always rise, he retreats, and he tells himself he's bored. But the truth, he's intimidated. You see, a real partner doesn't run from depth. He doesn't look for an escape the moment things stop being effortless. Real intimacy is not just built on laughter and touch. It's built on hard conversations, on uncomfortable truths, on seeing the flaws and still choosing to stay. But some men never learned how to go deep. They never learned that emotional closeness isn't weakness. They were raised to think that silence is peace and that control is love. So when their wives evolve emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and begin expecting more than just surface level presence, the man feels cornered. Not because she's become boring, but because he never planned on growing with her. This is where so many marriages begin to break quietly. A woman starts to rise, and instead of meeting her there, her husband shrinks away. He finds comfort in distractions, friends, screens, work, or sometimes, unfortunately, other women. Not because he's fallen out of love, but because he's fallen behind. He was comfortable with the version of his wife who never demanded his presence, just his paycheck. But now she wants his soul, his time, his truth, and that makes him uncomfortable. So he confuses his discomfort with boredom. But let's stop romanticizing the idea that a woman must always be soft, small, and silent to be loved. That she must never evolve faster than her husband, that her growth must be delayed so he can catch up. That is not love, that is emotional laziness, and it is the reason so many women feel like they are outgrowing their marriages. The truth is, a woman who grows is not a threat. She is an invitation to go deeper, to do better, to become more, but only the brave accept that invitation. The rest call it boredom and walk away. So no, most wives are not boring. They are awakening. They are outgrowing old versions of love that no longer serve them. And if a man cannot meet her in her growth, he loses her not because she left, but because he refused to grow beside her. A woman's greatest power is her ability to keep evolving, and yet this very evolution is what often gets overlooked or misunderstood in marriage. When a woman continues to grow intellectually, emotionally, creatively, she doesn't become boring, she becomes limitless. But the problem arises when the people around her, especially her husband, stop seeing her for who she's becoming and only focus on who she used to be. Growth is not a threat to love, it's the oxygen that keeps it alive. But many husbands stop breathing it in. They stop being curious. They stop asking questions. They stop being present for her transformation. You see, the woman you married is not meant to stay the same. She is not a photograph frozen in time. She is a story unfolding, chapter after chapter. She is meant to become wiser, louder, softer, stronger all at once. She is meant to heal the wounds she never spoke about, to chase dreams she once silenced, to discover new versions of herself she didn't even know existed. And that's not her drifting away, that's her rising. But if her husband is not watching, not listening, not celebrating her growth, then yes, one day she may seem unfamiliar to him. Not because she's changed into someone else, but because he stopped joining her in her becoming. Growth requires space, it requires encouragement, it requires love that is strong enough to let go of control. A woman who is supported in her growth becomes more vibrant, not more distant. She doesn't pull away from the relationship, she adds more depth to it. Her thoughts expand, her conversations deepen, her presence becomes magnetic. She starts bringing new energy to the relationship if her partner is ready to receive it. But when she is met with indifference or resistance, when her growth is met with silence or insecurity, she begins to outgrow the relationship itself. Too often, men mistake independence for detachment. They assume that when a woman starts living for herself, she's turning away from them. But what they don't see is that her growth is not about leaving, it's about leading. She's trying to bring more of herself into the relationship. More joy, more perspective, more richness. And if a man is secure enough to stand beside a woman who is constantly evolving, he doesn't just keep the relationship alive, he turns it into something extraordinary. But if he chooses to stay still while she keeps moving forward, then the distance between them is no longer just emotional, it becomes spiritual. She starts walking a path that he's not willing to travel, and eventually they stop meeting each other halfway. And then he says he's bored, but he's not bored, he's unprepared. Unprepared for the depth she now requires, unprepared for the conversation she now wants to have, unprepared for the version of her that no longer shrinks herself to make him comfortable. The most magnetic women are not the ones who remain unchanged, they are the ones who refuse to stop growing. They don't need to chase anyone, they don't need to beg to be noticed, their energy speaks for them. Their growth keeps them radiant, and that radiance doesn't fade when a man stops appreciating it, it only grows stronger. Because a woman who evolves for herself becomes unforgettable, no matter who chooses to ignore her. Somewhere along the journey of marriage, many women are made to believe that it's their job to keep their husband interested, to cook better, dress better, speak softer, adjust more, smile wider. And when he begins to drift, when he starts pulling away or looking elsewhere emotionally or physically, the world tells her, maybe you're not trying hard enough. But let's be honest, it is not the wife's responsibility to entertain a man who has stopped showing up emotionally. It is not her job to fix the boredom he created by becoming emotionally absent, mentally disengaged, or spiritually idle. Boredom isn't a wife's burden. It's a reflection of a man's inability to stay present in the deeper layers of a relationship. You don't get bored of someone you truly know. You get bored when you stop making the effort to explore who they are becoming, because the truth is women don't stand still. Even in silence, they are evolving. They are dealing with emotional labor, motherhood, career choices, hormonal shifts, identity crises, and healing from wounds they never mention. And if a man isn't tuned in, if he's not leaning in with curiosity and empathy, he'll miss it. He'll miss her becoming, and then he'll mistake her quiet for emptiness, but it's not emptiness, it's depth that he stopped diving into. When a man says he's bored, what he often means is, she doesn't excite me the way she used to. But the question is, what has he done to bring life into the relationship? When was the last time he truly listened not to her words, but to her silence? When was the last time he asked her how she's feeling, what she's dreaming about, what scares her now, what fulfills her lately? Because when a man stops doing the emotional work, he starts mislabeling his own neglect as her failure. A marriage is not a movie. It's not supposed to be entertaining 24/7. It's a partnership. It's a daily commitment to show up for each other, especially in the dull days, the quiet phases, the emotionally messy seasons. But many men abandon their emotional post. They stop watering the bond. They stop holding space, and then, when the connection dies, they blame the wife. They say she became too serious, too sensitive, too tired, but she's not tired of love, she's tired of doing all the work alone. There is a powerful freedom that comes when a woman finally understands that keeping a man interested is not her life's mission, that her worth is not tied to how well she performs the role of the wife, that love is not sustained by bending, sacrificing, and shrinking. It is sustained by mutual respect, consistent presence, and emotional maturity. And if he's bored, let him reflect. Let him own the part he stopped playing. Because a woman can cook the meals, raise the children, wear the dress, plan the trips, light the candles, and still be called boring by a man who's emotionally unavailable and spiritually disconnected. So the real question isn't why is the wife boring? The question is why is the husband numb? A woman who has learned to love herself will never carry the shame of someone else's disengagement. She will not beg to be seen. She will not break herself to keep someone entertained because she knows she was never the problem. His boredom was never her responsibility. His disinterest was never a reflection of her worth, and her job was never to keep him excited. Her job was always to stay true to who she is.